Okay. This piece of equipment emailed me and told me there's a problem, and I will explain what that means as we go forward. This is the freezer. It should be 10 below. It's currently about 30. They did have a truck delivery this morning, so the temperatures were going to be weird either way. However, I use more mechanical temperatures than air temperatures to tell me there's a problem, which is why I know right now at 8:30 there's a problem instead of not knowing for a little while longer. Both fans are spinning. There's no ice back here. It's not all iced up. And if you look at the thermostat, it's going to get really loud. But that is set to just below 0. So we are calling. You should be cooling. I want to really simplify this right now. The freezer liquid line, the center, is the hot pipe, and the suction line is the cold pipe. When the compressor is running, the liquid line temperatures are going up, and the suction line temperatures are going down, always as a mirror. I know there was a problem because my alarm is set to tell me when these two variables stay within 20 degrees of each other for 4 hours. Because what that tells me is that compressor has not run for 4 hours. And that's what this system emailed me. So we'll get back to the diagnosis. So this is the condenser to that unit. Oh, it just kicked on. Interesting. Okay, so let's watch it. First thing I'm going to notice right away, look at this sight glass. Short cycle. Okay, so you see how that sight glass is bubbling? This unit is almost out of Freon. And this is a unit that was installed a few months ago. So we need to figure out why we're out of gas, where the leak is. Short cycling, right? That's what we call it when the unit comes on and then it kicks off like that. So it's going to come on and off and on and off. This is why we're not cooling for sure. What I'm looking for is oil. Some evidence of a leak. We're going to open this thing up, take a better look at it before we put gauges on it. But this is off because of low pressure. And I'll explain that when we get into the pressure sensor. Okay. So, the unit was short cycling. We saw that earlier. I ran out to grab the Freon I needed. I come back and it's running. So, sight glass looks clear, although it was flashing a second ago before I started the camera. We are running 30 psi, which equates to 2 below, and 147 head pressure. So this is still a little low on gas based on the head pressure. So why? What's changed? Well, it's about 10, 12 degrees warmer than it was. So a totally another video to explain. There's a receiver right here. This receiver is a storage tank for Freon. If it is not appropriately charged with enough Freon in the reserve, when it gets really cold, trying to not overcomplicate it, when it gets really cold, that device right there actually bypasses the coil. So it's a head mass for control. So this morning it was 38 degrees and that temperature said, whoa, it's freezing out. I don't need the coil. I'll just send the Freon on. Well, when it does that, it changes the amount of Freon that's needed in the system, because you had Freon in the coil and then it shut it off and bypassed it. So now you need additional Freon. So what that means is, as the temperature warmed up, the headmaster control opened, and now we're only using through the coil, and it has enough Freon to do that. So we're gonna charge the unit. There we go. That's not the way to see. See the sight glass? That should be clear. It's flashing just a little bit. So we're gonna charge it, and then we're going to get the thermal camera, and we're gonna show you how we check the receiver level. And we're gonna fill the receiver to 3/4 full, and we're gonna mark it. And then we know no matter how cold it gets, we have an appropriate amount of Freon. They call it a winter charge. So they say the only surefire way to know that you have enough in the receiver is you show up on the coldest day of the year and you fill the unit until the sight glass clears up. So, I mean, it was cold this morning. It was 33, 34. So, but I mean, it's probably 50 now. So there you have it. Cold weather hit. So we're gonna gas it up a little bit and continue on. Okay, so I've got my bottle set up. 404, I've got the bottle open, upside down, feeding into the manifold shut. Always take a second, look at the label. So this unit originally, it said it was designed for a whole bunch of, you know, it can run various things. When we installed it, we crossed it out, marked 404. Like, just be sure, right? So this is a 404 unit, 404, we're good. The sight glass isn't flashing a whole lot, but it's flashing a little. I'm gonna bleed it in through the suction side. I'm gonna open this up. Pressures are gonna go weird because we're gonna take the pressure out of the bottle. You can see it flowing through the middle. I can generally watch the sight glass for it to get full, little by little. I'm gonna top it off. And we're gonna stop it, and we're gonna watch and see what happens with the head pressure. This is high because I just opened it, so it's getting the pressure from the bottle coming in. And then you little by little. So the box is a pretty high temp. Right now, -5 means that's the temperature of the coil theoretically, which is, you know, we're targeting 10 below. But the room's 40. So again, think of an air conditioner. It has to recycle. The temperature in that room is 40. It's gonna run 40 through -5, and maybe it's gonna become 28. Then it's gonna run 28 through -5 will become -8. Because this is fighting the box temperature, right? If that box is 40, it is affecting the temperature of the coil. So as the box temperature comes down, the coil temperature will also come down, and it'll become more and more efficient. Our sight glass is clear. I'm gonna let this run for a few minutes. I'm gonna pull up the diagnostics and show you what it's looking like from a mechanical perspective with my sensors. All right, I wanna go back a step and talk about why it wasn't running. Because I say a lot of things and terms, you know, that don't necessarily mean anything if you don't understand how this works. So what these are measuring is, I like to think of it as like your heart. So the compressor is the heart. This is the pressure in which it is pumping Freon out as a vapor. And this is the pressure in which it is coming back. Okay? So the whole way this unit works is downstairs so this is the line of the Freon coming back. So that runs all the way downstairs into the evaporator. On that line, there's a little shutoff valve. And the thermostat mounted inside, which I showed you, it controls that valve. So the thermostat says, I need to be 0 degrees. If I'm not 0 degrees, open it up, let the Freon flow. Well, when that happens, this comes back. Okay? If that unit were to satisfy right now and say, hey, I'm cold enough, it would close its switch. When it closes its switch, obviously Freon continues to get pumped out. Goes through the coil, heads downstairs, but it closes off what comes back. And this dies. So 26, 22, 19, 15, 12. So how the system knows to not break itself is this is a low pressure control. There's a sensor there that's attached to this suction line. Okay, so this suction line comes back and then into the, so when this hits too low of a pressure, that is reading the same thing this is. So this might be a little difficult to see. We'll see if I can get it. So it's adjustable. So this is set for about 28 degrees. It'll come on for 28 PSI with a differential of, I'm just going to call it 20 to keep it simple. So what that means is 28 and 20, the difference is 8. When this pumps down, when this hits 8 PSI, that unit interrupts the power to the system and shuts it down. So that's it. So that's how then it stops the compressor, it stops this number from climbing, and everything's safe and healthy inside. Until the thermostat says, hey, I'm not 0 degrees, open up. Then the Freon comes back. It comes back in a whoosh, right? Because remember, it's all sitting on the back side. So whoosh, the pressure comes through, probably 40, 50, 60 PSI. This only needs 28 to come back on, so it lets the system come on and it starts regulating its pressures again. So when it's short cycling, it's because this hit 8 PSI and the system shuts it down. When the system shuts down, the pressures climb up and they equalize. The pressure gets above 28 and it says, hey, I can run again. Off it goes. So, but that's because the valve inside is open, allowing Freon to come. Now, when it dies from its compression, because it's low on, so it's low on gas, so not enough was coming back, right? So let's get back to the real issue. It was low on gas, so there wasn't enough coming back to keep it above pressure when it was running. And then when it would shut off, pressures would build up, it would equalize, and off it goes again. So that's short cycling. Yeah, so that is, short cycling is caused by low pressure, and there's also a high pressure control, which does exactly the opposite. It monitors this, and if those fans stop working, that pressure goes through the roof, because this is a pressure measured after it is cooled. So the temperature coming out of here is blazing hot, right? And then here's your high pressure control, that if this hits a ridiculous temperature, it's going to shut off. There's the basics of that. Okay, so I figure we can kill 2 birds with 1 stone here. I didn't explain this, but I checked it earlier before I started rolling camera. I needed to make sure the unit wasn't in a defrost. This is a defrost timer. Every one of these is a defrost cycle. And every defrost cycle is set to be 30 minutes. So what happens is, right now, if I look at 1 and 3, 212 volts, that is my refrigeration. 1 and 4 is my defrost, nothing. When I turn this dial, it's going to go into a defrost. When I do that, it's going to de-energize the solenoid downstairs. Remember, that's that switch I was telling you about. It's going to stop the suction line from coming back, and you're going to watch the low pressure drop until the low pressure control that we just discussed shuts it down. So listen for the click. Solenoid just shut down. And it's off. Does that make sense? Now, remember I told you when it shuts off, these are going to equalize a little bit. So, but until that gets above 28, it's not going to come back on. So we're off. Now, downstairs, not only did it stop that, but now I'm going to energize. I'm going to look at 1 and 3 again. Okay, now 1 and 3 is 0, and 1 and 4 is 212. That is now running the heaters downstairs. I don't want to do that, but I wanted to show you this. Sometimes you show up and it's not running and they're like, oh, the box is hot, and you go, well, it's in a defrost. Calm down. There's another terminal, this X. So this X terminal is a defrost termination. It is inside the box, measuring the temperature of the evaporator. And if it gets too hot, because this is set to defrost for 30 minutes, well, maybe it only needs 15. It's going to recognize that it's too hot, and it's going to energize 1 and 3 again, and it's going to fire back up. So I'm going to turn this. When I turn this back on, the solenoid's going to open, and that low pressure is going to come rushing back. And once it breaks 28, the unit should come on. Interesting. So why didn't it come on? So there is another reason. I will show you. This little device right here. I'm reaching for my tool. Okay. So this little device is a delay for the compressor. What you don't want is a compressor short cycling on and off and on and off and on and off. And if you look at the top, there's a minutes column. This dial, it's set for about 4 minutes. So the compressor will not run unless it's been off for 4 minutes. I'm gonna turn this down. Amazing. And now it's up and running again. So there's a lot of reasons, right? A lot of nuances. You can be like, wait, that should have come back on. Why didn't it come back on? This is actually why I'm becoming a fan of the videos. Because I learn this every day. I didn't know about that or understand that not long ago. And then it was like, wait, why isn't it on? There should be a reason it's on. You start chasing wiring and you go, oh, power's going in, it's not coming out. That's killing it. Why? It's there to protect the compressor. I turned it down, but then I turned it back up. And I don't know if you hear that noise downstairs. That is the maintenance guys planing cutting boards. That's pretty awesome also, by the way. Big thanks to them for that. But yeah, so unit's now up and running. We're gonna let it go. I'm gonna correct the time. I'm actually not gonna correct the time because it's almost 10 o'clock and it's gonna wanna go into a defrost, and I want this to run right now. So we're just gonna let this run for a while, bring the box temp down, and hopefully that should have it taken care of. Let's revisit this now that we're operational. So the output temperature is 12. Box was about 32. So the box is 32, the output is 12. We know cooling is happening. The liquid line, from a technical perspective, compressor puts out hot, high pressure gas. It enters the condenser. The fan draws the outside air across it. It cools it until it saturates and becomes a liquid, and that's why that's called the liquid line. The suction line is where that liquid goes down into the evaporator and it hits a valve which chokes it way down. It reduces the pressure. In refrigeration, pressure equals temperature, so it drops our temperature. That low pressure liquid is then pumped through the evaporator inside, where those fans are pulling the box air across it, and it's actually heating it enough that it re-vaporizes and heads back up top to the compressor. So you'll notice that gap between the suction line and the liquid line. My system is set to recognize that it must be a 20-degree gap. When the system's working, the liquid line goes up and the suction line goes down, and it's like a mirror. So if there is ever a 4-hour period that those two are not 20 degrees apart, that tells me definitively the system thinks it's cooling, but the compressor isn't running. That's how I got out here this morning before we lost product.